Start recording. Let's see here. Let's make sure it's actually up on Twitch. And it's live on Twitch, and then it should be recording for YouTube. You can probably already hear it, but let me. There we go. So I'm in Minecraft. Now there is a special thing about today. Today is Easter. So instead of doing the normal thing I'd be doing, I'm going to be building the Easter story, and then as I explain it. So if you already know the Easter story, then I don't expect you to watch all the way through, but this is just like for all of you who either don't know it or like could use a refresher and like a good visual aid to really make that connection. What the Easter story actually is, like kind of how it starts. And so the whole thing about Easter is about this person who is both a person but also a lot more than a person, named Jesus. And so it starts out, well, obviously he was born, which I talked about that back in Christmas, but basically that's why we celebrate Christmas, is because as a Christian, I believe that the God of the universe sent his son to be the sacrifice atoning for us. Because I mean, you may think you've done good and you may have lived a decent life, but when it comes down to it, we've all done pretty bad things. We've all done some bad stuff. And when you take some person who is infinitely good, or not even a person, some like this infinitely powerful force who is infinitely good, then even the slightest mistakes, are infinitely bad against him. And so before we believed that we had Jesus, it was just people would have to make actual sacrifices, slaughter animals on atonement on their behalf. And so, luckily, we that's not a reliable way. It kind of says like he didn't even enjoy like the death happening, but it was just to show us the consequences of our sin. And so eventually, instead of us having to continue sacrifice more and more, the prophecies were fulfilled that a son, or God's son, would be born to the earth, both fully God, but fully in the form of a human, fully God and fully human. And so he could live a life that we live without ever making mistakes, just because he's God and can. He lived the same life we've all lived without ever doing any of the bad stuff we've done. And so that is roughly what I talked about last time and for the Christmas story. But today I'm going to get into how. And so I'm going to start out in John chapter 18. Let's get that there. So, Jesus was with his 12 disciples. So Jesus was a rabbi. He taught people and stuff. So he had 12 close disciples with him, and they were praying, and he told them that tonight, I'm going to get betrayed and going to get killed. So then Judas, one of the disciples, came up to him and kissed him on the side of the cheek as a sign to a bunch of soldiers to come arrest him. So in John chapter 18 verse 12, that's where it starts off. Then the detachment of soldiers with its commanders and Jewish officials arrested Jesus. And so he gets arrested, and they go to try him, and all these people are saying fake things and making up stuff against him. And so you'll hear a lot about Pilate. So Pilate is this judge. He's a Roman judge. He has some power, but he's a judge. And so Pilate, he takes him. He has him flogged, which is just beaten, and then the soldiers twisted a crown of thorns together. So, and then they placed it into his head. I can't even imagine how bad that hurt. And they clothed him in a purple robe. They went on to make fun of him and say all sorts of stuff and tell him to show him signs. But the whole point was that Jesus was going to have to die. And so obviously even though he could have saved himself, he had to die. That was the whole point of it, was that he had to die for our behalf. But so he gets beaten and like flogged down. And so Pilate was trying to be like, is this enough, guys? Because he got arrested by like the Jewish people and by like his own people. And so Pilate was like a Roman official, and he was just following like the standard laws. And so he just had him beaten because he didn't see any problems, and like what they were saying didn't add up. And so he just had him beaten to please the crowd. But that did not please the crowd. So they went on to shout. They shouted, "Take him away and crucify him." And then so he asked, "Shall I crucify your king?" And they went on to say, "We have no king but Caesar." And the chief priest answered. So finally, Pilate handed him over to them to be crucified. So if you don't know what being crucified is, that's why you see like crosses all the time in churches, is because a cross is this wooden structure. And that's what I'm going to start building for my first thing here. Which I'm going to build, like, not to scale one, but it's like this shape. Which I don't think I'm going to have enough wood. I'm going to have to get more wood, but that's okay. But it's like this. And so he got taken away to be crucified. And it wasn't like he was by himself. He was surrounded. On both sides of him were two criminals. Criminals who deserved to die, who had done bad things. And they knew that they were going to die. And they knew that they deserved it. Or at least they knew why they're getting punished. And one of them in the Bible, it says, recognize that Jesus truly was God. And that's where we get the whole thing of like heaven. Once you believe in God, you are saved. Is because one of the criminals recognized that he really was Jesus, like he really was the Son of God. And so he like admits that Jesus didn't even deserve to be up on the cross in the middle of the two. And so Jesus tells him that truly I tell you, like within just like a couple hours, like once he dies, he will be up in heaven, Jesus. So let me actually show the next verse. Yeah, so the soldiers took charge of Jesus, and he had to carry his own cross, which one really crazy thing it talks about in the Bible that like it wasn't even medically like reported for a long time was the whole thing about sweating blood. And you probably don't know what it even means, sweat blood, but basically when you are in such a critical condition that like the ovaries, whatever the word is, around your sweat glands ruptures, the blood goes into your sweat, and instead of like something like that. There's a word that starts with P that means like what you sweat out. Instead of sweating out sweat, you sweat out blood. And like he was in such a critical condition from just being beaten so harshly that he was sweating blood. And so he carries his cross. And so in one of the gospels, it says that like he got like a third of the way, and like he physically couldn't carry it any longer, so someone else helped him carry it up, but he had to carry it to the place of the skull, which is Golgotha. And so there they crucified him, which, I mean, they took these big metal nails, and they hammer them, which there's a lot of debate if it's in your palm or in between the bone there, but they put nails to hold you like this, and then they put nails through your feet so that you are physically stuck with your arms on either side and your feet like right here, where you're just hanging until you die. Like a long, painful death that's just horrible. And so he sat there either side with Jesus in the middle of the two crosses, which I ran out of spruce wood, but these should all be like the same wood. But that's not like a big deal. So let me hold the next verse. So, people saw he was thirsty, and they fixed some sour wine onto a sponge and held it up to him. And so after he received the drink, Jesus said, "It is finished." And he just gave up his spirit. He surrendered his spirit, and he died. And so he bowed his head and gave his spirit. And so the people, the like Roman guards, they want to they usually want to make sure that people are dead, and so what they'll do is they'll break your legs so that you can't breathe, because basically you'll since you're hanging by your arms and your legs, you kind of have to push up with your feet to try to get breaths, like so try to breathe. So they'll break your legs so that you like eventually you just can't breathe, and so no matter what you die, which is just like horrible. But he already surrendered his spirit, so they just go up to him and they take a spear, and I think that's my next verse. So yeah, instead one of the soldiers pierced Jesus' side with a spear, bringing a sudden flow of blood, but also water. And so the man who saw it has given his testimony, and the testimony is true. So yeah, he got, instead of breaking his legs, he was already dead, so they just stab him in the side and water flows out and blood. And so since he's now dead, and this like darkness and earthquakes start happening, and there's all sorts of stuff. If you go to like Mark, I'm in John for these verses, but if you go to Mark, there's a lot of stuff you can find about I don't know if the noise is about like the stuff about like tombs being opened and like all the saints rising up and like going through the city gates and like talking. But yeah, so this huge earthquake happens. It gets like darkness everywhere, and so they try to go fast and take him to a tomb. So they have a available tomb. So that's the next part. At the place where Jesus was crucified, there was a garden, and in the garden, a new tomb in which no one had ever been laid, because it was the Jewish day of the preparation. Since the tomb was nearby, they laid Jesus there. And so, out of fear that some of the disciples would try to steal his body and say he had been raised again, as Jesus has said he would, they rolled this huge like stone, like a bunch of guards all together, barely like insane amounts of strength just to move it, a ton of force. They roll a huge stone, seal it, and then have people there 24/7 guarding it. And so, as he said, he'd lie for 3 days and then he'd be raised again on the third day. That's why we have Good Friday, which it doesn't sound very good, because Good Friday is the day that Jesus would have died, like he would have been crucified. But we call it Good Friday just because Friday's good because Sunday comes afterwards. And so Sunday is the day, I mean, it's just, for them it was 3 days later, so roughly Sunday for us would have, the day after Sabbath, would have been when he rises up out of the tomb. So it talks about, I'm not sure which gospel it is, like this angel of like lightning comes down and rolls away the tomb. And like this isn't like this isn't his disciples who say this. This is like the Roman guards who are guarding it. Describe this big like lightning, like we say it's an angel because that's as it, like with the context of us, we say it's angel, but to them it was just like this big force of lightning in the form of like a presence is there. And it's like face of lightning, like immensely scary, and that's nowhere close to God's full power. But like just that is terrifying. And they see this thing come, and on its own, easily rolls away the stone, and so Jesus rises. And so now the Sabbath day was the day before Jesus rose. So because the Sabbath was coming, they couldn't like anoint his body. I think it's anointing, where they couldn't put spices on and prepare the body. So they came back 3 days later, and so Mary Magdalene was going there, and so let's get that one there. So early on the first day of the week, while it was still dark, Mary Magdalene went to the tomb and saw that the stone had been removed from the entrance. So, which I guess I skipped out a couple verses there. She sees it's empty, and depending on translations, you'll see slightly different things. But she runs back and reports it to Peter, and Peter's like, I gotta go see. So, Peter, he Simon Peter came along with him and went straight into the tomb. He saw the strips of linen lying there. So over here, I'm going to build a little tomb. Let me get this just built up a little bit. And then instead of having a body in it, it's going to be the tomb's open and there's just linen cloth. Now, there's actually a ton of debate about where Jesus was for the 3 days before he rose. A lot of people say he just went up to heaven, and some people say like he went other places, or like he even went like to like the general like underworld type thing or whatever. You'll hear a lot of debate about it, but all we know for sure is just he was dead for 3 days. Okay, and then I'll make like a little tomb right here. And then over here we got our linen cloth, and it's an empty tomb. So yeah, so there's just empty tomb. And so like Mary Magdalene, she just assumes someone has managed to sneak past all the guards and steal the body. She doesn't understand how or what happened, but that's just the most logical conclusion she can draw. And so she stood outside the tomb crying. And as she wept, she went over to look into the tomb. And she saw 2 angels in white seated there where Jesus' body had been. And at the head, one at the head and the other at the feet. And I mean that must be hard. That must be really hard after what you're going through. And so someone else comes up behind her, and she can't recognize who it is. And she just assumes, oh, it must be a gardener, it must be someone. And she kind of talks with him a little bit, but she's not really paying attention. She's sad. And it's Jesus, right? Again, so Jesus said to her, Mary, and she turns toward him and cried out in Aramaic, Rabboni, which means teacher. My pronunciation is not the best, but Jesus said to her, do not hold on to me, for I have not yet ascended to the Father. So, I mean, just by going off of this, she's like, she's like probably clinging onto him, just out of like love. But go instead to my brothers and tell them, I'm ascending to my Father and your Father, to my God and your God. So what he means by that is after he's going on for a little while, showing people that he is alive, he is risen, that he's going to ascend into heaven with God. Which I forgot to mention, when he dies, not only does like earthquakes happen, but like this huge, like almost like almost like a solar eclipse, but for a long time happens, where like the sun just ceases its light and it gets dark out, really dark. And so like you can actually see it where it's been recorded in like other places around the world where they write down that this darkness happened as like a long eclipse or like all sorts of different things at the exact same time in multiple various different places. But like just because of how long it could have been, it can't just be concluded to be an eclipse. And because eclipses don't last like that. And like there's tons of evidence showing that like it happened, like just everything went dark. And then the actual, like in the Holy of Holies, where like only like the highest chief priest could go to talk to God, there's this veil covering it. And that veil like separates the outside from like the place where God dwelled on earth at first. And it gets ripped top down, and in a way that only God could have done it. just showing that we no longer need some of the high priests to intervene with God for us. We can you can like have private conversations with him, and he is with all of us through the Holy Spirit. Um, is I don't think that's my last verse. I think I might have forgot to put on any more after that. So basically, I'm just gonna get rid of zombies there. I'm gonna go ahead and just log off. So let's disconnect, and I'm gonna get rid of this. So after Jesus goes on to see her, he appears to two other disciples traveling, and so they go report to the group of the other disciples, and they're like, "There's no way this could be true." And then God appears to all of them except Thomas, and so they're all telling Thomas like different times. We all saw Jesus in different ways and stuff. It was really him, and Thomas basically just says, "Unless I can put my hands on the scars in his hands and my hand on his side where he was stabbed with the spear, then I won't believe." And a lot of people like to think, well, I wouldn't doubt like Thomas, but I'm pretty sure I can easily see me myself doubting the same way. I think everybody could be doubting just like Thomas did, but he didn't believe it. And so eventually Jesus appears, which he never like walks to the doors. He just appears in the rooms, and he appears and shows Thomas, and he goes, "Thomas, come here. See my hands? Touch my hands. Touch the holes in my hands. See my side? Put your hand on my side." And so he does, and he believes. And Jesus continues for like 40 days, and he eventually goes up and he ascends into heaven. And so we know that one day again he'll come down with dominion and power. But that is why Easter is so important. Not for anything like dumb or anything. Just it's not all about just hunting some eggs. It's important because like it all started as Christians. We believe that God sent his son as the final atoning sacrifice because we are just messed up. And if you don't think you're messed up, I challenge you, try to go for even just one day without having a single bad thought and without lying a single time and thinking like anything bad at all. And if you think you're so good, trust me, you're not. And even if you break it down even more, if you ever told a lie, if you ever taken anything, we're all lying thieves. And so on our own we don't have much hope, but luckily we have hope not in ourselves, but from him. And that's what's so important and so great about Easter and about God. That's why Christians were so connected to God, because we believe that he made the sacrifice for us because we just can't be good enough. When compared to something infinitely holy, infinitely set apart from us without ever doing anything bad, we can never compare. And so that is the Easter story. And that is why it's so important. And so I hope that makes a difference for you. If you didn't already know, that's what it is. Anyways, thank you guys so much for watching. Remember, God loves you. And goodbye.